All right, guys, we're going to try this live show thing again. What's happening? Hope everybody's having a fantastic whatever day you're watching this. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. If you like what you see, like, subscribe, share. It helps the channel a ton. This channel really is not much more than a background noise generator. Every once in a while, I'll dive in and do a screen share, but for the most part, we're just hanging out talking. So in this installment, I'm going to be primarily talking about the middleweight sport bike scene right now. And kind of, well, I got to ask the question, the R9, is it too much of a compromise? And I suppose the more that I've seen of this bike and the more of the reviews that I've seen of this bike, it might lead you to believe that there's a little bit of, there's a major holdback, if you will, with this bike. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to dive into that just a little bit. This video is kind of also fantailing another video that I had put out today where I'm on the GSX-R 1000. And while I'm on that bike, I'm talking about the middleweight sport bike class, but really more to the point, I'm talking specifically initially about the 750, but then my mind kind of wanders onto that R9, and it's mainly because of my experience with my 1998 Triumph Daytona, which is a 955, makes about the same power as the R9. And I got to thinking about that bike now. If it were to be released now, what would the impact of that machine be? And realistically, it would be nothing more than one of these super middleweights. They all make about the same power. They all redline at about 10,000, 10,500, give or take RPM. There's not a whole lot that separates that bike from this new class of machine. And, you know, the more I was thinking about that, the more I got to thinking again, would I buy that bike at, say, $13,000 before I would buy, say, any motorcycle for $12,500 like the R9, or a much more powerful bike at, say, $14,000, $15,000, $16,000. Oh, wait a minute. Now you're starting to encroach upon the Panigale V2 and potentially the KTM RCR 990 price points. And this is where things get kind of weird, because the only truly viable motorcycle that is in that class is going to be the Yamaha R9, at least for the price that you're going to want to spend for a motorcycle that puts out about 120 horsepower. So with that being said, guys, I got to ask, for y'all that are on the live right now, how is it coming through? Can you guys see me? Can you hear me? Am I frozen? Am I stuck in time? Just curious. Sometimes the live shows get like that. And so if you guys can respond and let me know, that would be great. So if I don't hear from you, I'm going to guess that the live show is flaking out, which has been a little bit too regular here lately. But at any rate, yeah, let me know what it looks like. And if the live show is just not going to work, then we'll just pick it back up on Tuesday. Tuesday seems to be a little bit easier to, I don't know, get in on the live show. And when I'm saying that, I mean, like, for the live show to be like for it to work. So anyway, but I wanted to talk about that. Glenn saying it's all good, man. I appreciate that. Sweet. Well, then I will keep yammering. So here's the thing. When I was riding the 1000 today, what a lot of folks will say about the new R9 and any of these heavier weight middleweights, what a lot of folks will say about them is that they give all the torque of a leader class bike with all the horsepower of a modern middleweight, the streetability of a modern middleweight, or the ease of use, if you will, of a modern middleweight. You're going to hear something like that come from any of the folks that are going to be marketing and selling those bikes. But I'm curious as to whether or not those folks have ever ridden a Kawasaki 636, for example, or a GSX-R 600, much less a 750. Because for me, guys, look, I'm a little bit confused when guys say that things like a motorcycle need to be revved to get the most out of them. Because for me, the tachometer, I don't care if it's 4,000 RPM or 14,000 RPM. I'm just going off of a percentage. I have a red line, and then I have the upper third, which is where I'm going to want to keep that motorcycle. That's where the power band is. For any machine that runs on gasoline or internal combustion, your top third is where you're going to be running that thing the most if you're trying to extract power out of it. So I don't understand what the difference is from one bike to the next to the next. I've never been able to accept that that's a decent enough excuse. I don't get me wrong. I get from idle up to that point. Now there's a responsiveness that you can get in that power band that I completely can understand. I mean, guys, look, you're talking to somebody that has a Triumph T120, a Triumph Daytona T595, and then a GSX-R 750 and 1000. Those RPM ranges are going up by quite a bit with every one of those motorcycles that I mentioned. But when I'm out on the Bonneville, for example, I'm not worried about, power down low. That bike's going to be between, 4.5 and 6,500 RPM the entire time. But I guess that's kind of getting away from the point. I suppose for me, it's really more a question of, what does it feel like to ride these things? If you don't have torque, you've got gearing. That's another thing. Anyway, I kind of understand where these guys are talking about when you're talking about usable power, but usable power at what cost? That cost is over rev. It just does not allow the machine to breathe where it needs to breathe the most. And unfortunately, they're not putting down enough torque to really test the limits of tire technology. Ask me how I know. I just got back with a GSX-R 1000 today. And I can tell you that these bikes that don't make the kind of power that thing does, yeah, you can be a lot more ham-fisted with it, but you don't get the over rev that you get with, say, for example, an R6 or a GSX-R 750. And that becomes the problem. Now you're bouncing the thing off of a rev limiter when you've got the thing on the side of the tire, and you're just bringing it back to straight up, and you're really pinned on that throttle. You're trying to get as much drive out of that corner as you can. And then you've got to take a shift because you're bouncing it off the rev limiter. And again, if you ever watch me riding my Daytona, you'll see where that tack is falling near that red line. Tim's checking in saying all clear for me, and I'm in Australia. Very nice. That's cool then. Thank you, sir. Tim saying Suzuki needs to make a GSX-R 850 and they would win everything. I tell you what, if you look at it realistically, if you went, okay, well, 600 was here. There is no 750 class realistically anymore. And super sport, that's again for these super middleweights. If you're gonna neuter a bike anyway, why not literally come straight in the middle? 600, skip 700, 800, skip 900, and now the 1000. You would literally stair step it perfectly through the lineup. I've often wondered this, when the 750 became really the property, like that CC just became, the monopoly that Suzuki has on it. I get that you don't need, or there's no real reason to change that bike, but just a little bit more of a bore and a little bit more of a stroke, or just a little bit more of a bore in general. And you wouldn't even have to revise the heads. You would have unshrouded the intake and exhaust side anyway, a slight overbore, get it to 800 cc's. And yeah, and now instead of a 150 horsepower bike, when it's unrestricted, now let's say it's 160. And now it really is making leader class, albeit entry, leader class horsepower with a bit more of a manageable power band. Throw into that a good looking TFT and a quick shifter for those that might want it. And now you've got the recipe for the ultimate street bike package, a bike that would absolutely crush in the marketplace. So for me, that's really more what I'm looking at. But unfortunately, no other manufacturer is building a bike like this. And when I say crush it, here's the thing. Realistically speaking, for the bike to be fun, really fun, I mean, properly just a freaking laugh factory, it's got to be able to do honest to goodness sport bike stuff. The thousand, this is where 1,000cc bikes are completely misunderstood. Leader class bikes deliver power in an exceptionally intuitive way when you're thinking about it. If I've got that bike on the side of the tire, I'm looking through the corner and I start pouring on throttle, there's no dead spot. Every millimeter of throttle input, I control an amount of torque, an amount of twist on that rear tire. A little bit too much, and I can feel it start to step out a little bit. And I couldn't get a good shot of this today, but after one of the laps that I didn't have recorded, that I didn't record, I pulled over and I stopped and I'm looking at the rear tire, and I mean, it's feathered pretty decent after just one hard hit through that right hander. And all that is that's me rolling into the throttle, getting the bike set up. You always hear me talk about set up, drop in, maintenance, power, power, power. That's with me setting up and dropping about at about the 750s pace, by the way. Let me just put that out there for you. I'm dropping it in at about the 750 pace on drop in, maintenance, and then I immediately start to pour the coal to that thing just as it's coming up. I'm pulling it up, 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 and then I'm pinned just as it's coming up, and a little bit of a fade on the front tire comes down, and then it's immediately brake, downshift, set up, maintenance, and then I hum into our favorite stop sign. Well, I pulled over after that, and I mean, that tire was feathered pretty decent, and I mean, I was absolutely ripping it. And the bike's loving it. It's just along for the ride. And so I guess the point that I'm making with me illustrating that for you is you're not going to overpower modern tire technology with any of the middleweights. I don't care if it's a super middleweight or a traditional middleweight, again, like GSXR 600, 636, CBR 600. You're not going to overpower modern tire technology. What I will say, though, is because the leader bike is so intuitive when you're pulling throttle and you're just as you're killing that apex, the super middleweights promise this. The problem is when you are on the side of the tire, you're starting to roll into the throttle, you're bringing that bike back up, you're going to have to grab a shift. Because I can promise you, I've done that with the Daytona, and you're not going to be taxing the tire as much as a leader bike, but it is going to have better drive than, say, a 600 in that area. But you're still not taxing the modern tire technology. And I guess for me, why have all the rider aids and stuff like that on a bike that you're not, if you are employing that technology, then something's gone really weird. Okay. I'm just saying, I'll leave that out there. I mean, I understand that technology is a neat thing, wheelie control, 6-axis IMU and all that. Great. I ride a leader bike on level A, which is max power, level 1 on rider mode, which is the absolute least intrusive. And it does great. I've never felt it or never noticed it kick in. Listen, and the only reason why I run with it in any on position is because I paid for it. There's something in my brain that if it's part of the technology suite of the bike and I don't have any interference with it, I might as well employ it on some level. And it does a great job where it sits now. So I can't really complain about it, but you could have the middleweights with no rider aids, and I don't think it really would make much of a difference unless you're in the wet. In that case, I completely understand and I completely get it. But anyway, getting back to it, the downside to where the performance window of the R9, it's pretty apparent when you start to see the reviews. And here's the dumbest thing about this. Let me think about this for a minute. I had to sit down and watch the review between the Panigale V2, the R9, and the GSX-R 750. And if you guys haven't seen that one, hunt that one down and see if you can find it. That is one of the most telling reviews I've ever seen, where you listen to it and it's like you're listening to guys that don't ever ride real aggressively, or very rarely do, or are very, I don't know, limited in skill set. I don't know what it is, but anyway, they're talking about, well, the quick shifter helped the R9 accelerate out of corners, and I felt so much more confidence because I had all these electronic controls and nannies and stuff. And for people of a certain age, we hear that and we're going, what kind of pussy shit is this? So anyway, the thing is that you can't convince me that any top 10 A group rider at any club circuit would make mincemeat of an R9 with an R6, much less or much worse with a GSX-R 750. And here's the other downside to the R9 that I keep seeing. The R9 doesn't have ram air. The R9, I don't know what's going on with that rear swing arm, why people keep switching that thing out. But the R9 has the same wheelbase as the GSX-R 1000. It's even about an inch longer than the GSX-R 750 and about an inch and a quarter longer than the GSX-R 600. There is a slight difference between those two bikes, the 600 and 750, by the way. But it has more to do with gearing and sprocket size and chain length. But I guess the point that I'm making here is, man, look, I can say all of this because I've got a bike that's a decent stand-in for the R9. But I've never ridden an R9. They're impossible to find, and it's impossible to, it's impossible to really put out any kind of a sophisticated argument for that bike or against it, since I've never ridden it in person. But again, I've got a really good stand-in, and so I think I can speak at least from that level of experience. But I haven't heard from anybody with an R9, and I've put this out there on several occasions. Guys, if you've got an R9 and you're watching this, how do you like it? What are you coming from to the R9? What is it that I'm missing with this bike? Do I have it right? I guess another question that I have for our friends out there that do have the R9s, since if you've had it for a hot minute, have you run up against somebody with a GSX-R 750 or an R6 on the street? What did that end up like? I guess I don't know what I get to a point with that bike where I just don't know what to make of it anymore. And I love that it's got all the technology. I love that it's got the quick shifter. I love that it has all of that. But unless you're coming from an R7, I don't really know what the benefit is for the R9, especially if you're coming from like a GSX-R 600. Or did you come from, say, I don't know, a 636 and you picked up an R9? Again, I would love to hear the experience and the why behind the what when we're talking about the switch to the R9, I guess. So it is what it is. I figure for as long as I have been, as long as I've been riding, I've never found a bike, again, and you guys will hear me say this a lot, I've never found a bike that I just disliked. There was some technology maybe that I didn't like in the E-clutch with that Honda CB650 or CBR 650, I should say. There have been motorcycles here or there that I personally wouldn't buy, but I've never met a motorcycle that inherently I didn't like. And for me, the R9 might end up being the first bike. I mean, I'd love to get an opportunity to ride one. And and for no other reason than to shut me up about the R9 and just to get whatever negativity that might be rolling around in my head out of there. But here's the thing with the R9 that bugs me. It is it's a corporate engine in a sport bike. It's like putting a low compression 350 in an old Corvette. I mean, yeah, it'll get around, it'll sound good, it'll handle well, but it's not really a performance mill, right? So, I mean, does that make it bad? I don't think that inherently is a baked in negative for the bike. There's nothing wrong with it. And by all accounts, I mean, the CP3 engine is a riot to live with. So there's that. I mean, I don't want to sit here and knock it until I try it, but unfortunately, I can tell you that if Yamaha, here's the problem. Yamaha could have really knocked it out of the park with this bike and they didn't. And I think that for me, that's the biggest problem. You see, in race trim, that motorcycle has higher compression. It's got ram air. Again, I've got to make it really clear that the street bike does not come with ram air. It's got revised camshafts. All right, a completely different exhaust system, which I can't really hold that against Yamaha, but at least give it a more traditional exhaust, not that pregnancy pouch that's underneath that bike. It just doesn't really make sense. Put something together kind of like Suzuki does or Kawasaki does with their catalytic converters on their sport bikes. If you have to run them, you might as well do it right? Anyway, but even with everything done to that bike, it's still just competitive with, let's all say it together now, the GSX-R 750. I know, but still, I got to bring it up. And yes, it's making more torque, but it's only revving to 11,000 RPM, and that's with everything thrown at that bike. Or to say that that's with about $4,000 worth of upgrades, and now you've already spent more on your middleweight than, let's all say it together now, the GSX-R 1000. Damn it. Yeah, so you see where I'm coming from with this. It just, if Suzuki for 15 grand or 14.5, okay, it comes in at 12.5, at $14,000, maybe 14.5. Yamaha. Could you do something for me with the R9? And I understand you're RPM limited based on bore and stroke sizing. I understand that there are some physics in here that are going to keep you from being able to spin this thing where you need to. But my suggestions to make the R9 the ultimate bike and to shut up people like me that keep asking these stupid questions about R9s all the time. This is what we wanted out of the R9. Everything about the chassis, yes, leave that alone. I understand there's something going on with the swing arm, just reinforce it. That's nothing to worry about. Just fix that problem separately. But out of this engine, if it's going to have all the technology suite that it has, it needs to be a 13-to-1 compression engine. Every other sport bike except for the GSX-R 750 is 13.x to 1, whatever that number is. The GSX-R 750 is coming in at 12.5 to 1, which is comical in a way if you think about it by today's standards. Well, the engine's 20 years old, okay? So it's tip of the spear technology back then. But anyway, you get the idea. This is why I keep saying the 750 has got so much left on the plate. It's not even funny. But so does the CP3. So bump up the compression of the CP3 to, golly, man, at least give it 12.8 or 12.9. Give it a swinging chance. Next, give this bike ram air. Give it a proper air induction system. I don't know what the fuck is going on with whoever decided that that air intake system was going to work for that bike. But we all know that it doesn't. Get rid of that, put a traditional air intake system on that bike. You can do it because the race plastics, the race bodywork incorporates it. So just do that. Next, when we're talking about allowing this bike to breathe, I understand the physics behind the inability of this bike to breathe past, say, 12,000 RPM. Put a hard limiter on this thing at 11.6 or 11.7 and get this bike to make peak power not at 10,000 but at 11,000 RPM or 10.8, something like that, and allow it to at least have over rev of, say, 750 or so RPM. At least give it that level of a window of performance. Obviously, camshafts are going to have to get changed to get that to work, and do what it takes to get this bike to a legit 125 or 130 horsepower at the rear wheel. Because look, here's the thing. Everybody is kind of tired, just a little bit tired, of the narrative of these super middleweights that just won't rev out. And that is the thing that's going to end up hurting them the most. Especially, look, if Suzuki ever did decide they wanted to revise the GSXR 750 into something other than what it is today, which they don't have any honest to goodness reason to do it, but if they did one day just wake up in a pissed off mood and bumped up compression, gave it some technology, it would cost another couple of grand to do it. But I mean, change up the engine, bump it, basically make this thing to where it's even in the American market starts putting down 130, 132 horsepower from the factory with a de-restricted 142, 150. Ooh-wee, that's a whole different conversation. So anyway, it's just always been a little bit odd to me why Suzuki never did anything with that 750. Mainly because if they did anything with the 750, though, it'd be infringing heavily on the GSXR 1000. Ooh, could you imagine the 750 slight bump in displacement with the VVT on the intake cam the way that the 1000 has? And it's foolproof. It's a centrifugal unit. There's no oil valves or anything like that working in there. Oh, that would be dirty. Bump up compression. Little bit different camshafts. Allow that thing to breathe a little bit better. Yeah, that would be about 15 or 18 horsepower right there. But anyway, guys, that's just me yammering on. Hey, at least the live show's working. I'll tell you what, we have been having all kinds of problems with this live show. So since we're coming in strong, that's all that matters for me. Sovereign is in. Got the ball guy with the flex and the